Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into something absolutely fascinating. It's a high-stakes simulation known as the hearing. Now, what we're looking at here is a meticulously designed 11-day experiential curriculum. Its goal? To teach a really crucial life skill, how to make decisions under extreme uncertainty. It's just a fantastic deep dive into how we process information, how we get totally swayed by our emotions, and how we can actually learn to build defensible arguments when there are just no easy answers. We're going to break down the actual architecture of this curriculum step by step, using the materials straight from the source.
And to really understand how this works, we have to look at the incredibly high stakes of the scenario itself. So picture this. You are sitting on a city planning committee for the divided city of Millbrook, and your committee has just been handed exactly $4.5 million. Your task? You've got to allocate this money to revitalize a massive abandoned factory site. You have to make a choice, and whatever choice you make is going to directly impact the lives, the economy, and the future of an entire community. The pressure's on, and the clock is literally ticking.
But here is where the whole thing takes a wild turn. This isn't actually a real municipal crisis. It is a brilliantly disguised trap for 8th grade social studies students. And honestly, they might be handling it better than some actual politicians. These kids walk into class thinking they're just, learning about local government and city planning. But right underneath the surface, this simulation is engineered to completely test their mental blind spots. It's an incredible educational tool, all wrapped up in a tense civic drama.
So, let's look at the setup. The ultimate civic trap, featuring 3 defensible proposals. The students are presented with 3 very different but seemingly completely valid ways to spend that $4.5 million. But here's the catch. The simulation is rigged so that only one of these paths is actually mathematically sound. The creators specifically engineered these proposals to pit human psychology directly against empirical data. Let's see how they do it.
Here is exactly how the trap is set. On one side, you have Proposal A. It's this shiny innovation hub pitched by a super polished CEO named Vanessa Liu. She's promising 200 jobs and a massive 90% occupancy rate. Then there's Proposal C, an after-school recreation center. This one is passionately backed by a celebrity former athlete, Marcus Reed, and he's aiming to save at-risk youth using a volunteer staff. Both of these are thrilling, right? They're deeply emotional. But then, you have Proposal B, Riverside Affordable Housing. It's pitched by a housing director, David Okafor, using these dry spreadsheets, boring blueprints, and absolutely zero marketing spin. It is intentionally designed to be the absolute most boring option in the room. Now think about the massive gap in the numbers here. Proposal B only aims to build 48 units of affordable housing, but the city's documented needs assessment, it shows a deficit of 340 units. That means Proposal B only solves 14% of the actual problem. And the curriculum designers know exactly what they're doing here. They know students will instinctively seize on this huge gap. They're going to argue that 14% just isn't enough, which baits them right into rejecting the only financially sustainable proposal just because it doesn't offer some perfect magical fix. And that leads directly to this incredibly punchy piece of guidance given to the teachers who run the simulation. When students inevitably start complaining about that 14%, teachers are instructed to just drop this logic right on them. Choosing not to house 48 families because 48 is not 340 is a decision to house 0 families. That is not analysis, that is perfectionism deployed as avoidance. Boom. I mean, that completely dismantles the counterargument, right? It teaches the students that holding out for a flawed solution is usually just an excuse to avoid making a really hard, incremental choice. It is such a profound lesson in realistic problem solving. Which brings us to the true underlying purpose of the curriculum, the cognitive bias minefield, or how to weaponize human nature. See, this isn't actually a simulation about city planning at all. It is a meticulously constructed gauntlet designed to trigger human cognitive biases. By giving the kids these really compelling but deeply flawed options, the simulation basically forces them to navigate a minefield of their own psychological shortcuts. The curriculum targets what psychologists call the canonical 6 cognitive biases, and it maps them out day by day. On day 1, students experience anchoring. They latch on to Proposal A's flashy promise of 200 jobs as their baseline for success. Then, day 2, authority bias kicks in when that CEO presents. By day 6, confirmation bias takes over. Students are forced to realize they've been cherry-picking evidence that supports their favorite proposal while completely ignoring the data that contradicts it. It is a scheduled, day-by-day manipulation of their reasoning.
Let's look a little closer at how this trap springs on day 2, which leans really heavily into authority bias. The kids watch Vanessa Liu, that charismatic CEO, project a huge 90% occupancy rate for her tech hub. Contrast that with David Okafor. His affordable housing presentation is a verifiable reality backed by actual municipal waitlists, but he delivers it through totally dry spreadsheets. The students instinctively fall right into the trap. They confuse Vanessa's professional, highly confident presentation style with the actual mathematical quality of her data. They're trusting the title and not the math. The major takeaway the simulation drives home here is just universally powerful. Confidence is a delivery style. Evidence is what is left when the speaker stops talking. I mean, wow, this is such a crucial lesson, and not just for 8th graders. Think about adults consuming modern media, watching political debates, or sitting in corporate boardrooms. Just because someone sounds like they know exactly what they are talking about definitely doesn't mean their numbers actually add up.
But then, on day 4, the simulation violently shatters this illusion. The students are handed a comparable cities data packet, and this outside evidence is brutal. It reveals that real-world tech hubs only ever achieve about 38 to 52% occupancy. That completely destroys the CEO's 90% promise. It also shows that recreation centers that rely on volunteer staffing, just like the celebrity's proposal, almost always fail within 2 years, suffering massive cost overruns of 35 to 60%. Suddenly, all that optimism bias surrounding the shiny proposals just collides head-on with hard, empirical reality.
Now we move into naming the invisible poles, using a discovery-first reveal. This right here is the pedagogical genius of the entire exercise. The creators call it metacognition, or basically thinking about your thinking. It's not enough for the kids to just make a choice at the end. They actually have to understand the invisible psychological forces that were manipulating their decision-making process in real time. But here is the secret sauce. It's a discovery-first approach. Throughout all of this super intense deliberation, the students are never actually told they're learning about cognitive biases. You won't find the words anchoring or confirmation bias anywhere in their workbooks. The designers know that if you give a student the vocabulary way too early, they're just going to intellectualize it and dodge the actual experience. No, they have to genuinely feel the pull of the manipulation. They have to fall for the trap. And only then, on the very last day, are they finally given the vocabulary to name exactly what just happened to them.
To help them untangle all of this, Day 7 introduces a really brilliant exercise. Students have to objectively rank all their sources of evidence. They're taught to walk through 4 strict criteria: proximity, motive, audience, and corroboration. This forces them to take a dry, independent city budget analyst's memo and place it at the absolute top of their hierarchy, while pushing that highly emotional celebrity testimonies straight to the bottom. They learn the hard way that the loudest source is rarely the most reliable one.
Then, by day 8, this completely fascinating psychological hurdle emerges. The students have spent over a week working together to defend their chosen proposal, right? But when they exchange papers for peer review, a lot of them fiercely resist changing their minds, even when they're staring at undeniable counter-evidence. Why? The sunk cost fallacy. They feel like if they abandon their position now, the last 7 days of hard work were just completely wasted. The curriculum forces them to confront this exact feeling. It teaches them that changing your mind because you found new, better evidence is a sign of analytical strength, not weakness.
As we reach the climax of the simulation, the focus shifts to making a defensible decision under conditions of extreme uncertainty. On day 9, an independent budget analyst's memo drops, laying out the brutal 5-year fiscal realities for every single choice. The students can't hide behind optimism anymore. They have to commit to a final recommendation, and they have to formally sign their names to it.
And the entire simulation culminates in one overarching moral lesson that is just beautifully summarized by this idea. Every budget is a moral document. It says whose need the town decided to meet first. This is exactly where ethical reasoning and stakeholder awareness take center stage. Because the budget is fixed, the students learn that funding one dream explicitly means defunding another. Making a truly defensible decision means you don't just get to celebrate the benefits. You have to honestly look the community in the eye and own the trade-offs you are forcing them to accept.
Which brings us to the final moments of the hearing. On day 10, after all the recommendations are submitted and those cognitive biases are finally named, the students are left with this lingering, provocative question. Whose voice did you trust too quickly, and why? It's such a powerful moment of self-reflection. And honestly, looking at how our modern world operates today, it's a question we should all be asking ourselves the next time we're handed an easy answer to a really complex problem. Whose voice do you trust too quickly, and why?